Welcome to the Financial Liberty Podcast. Until you wake up from the American dream, financial uncertainty will be your American reality. Join Sam Legaspi and Ko Tsukamoto and their guests as they explore how you can attain financial liberty by uncovering truths that have been kept secret for decades. Have you ever played a game and didn't know the rules? How can you ever win? Learn the rules to the game and in turn, learn how to win. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Liberty Project with Sam Legaspi and Ko Tsukamoto. I don't know what we're talking about today, so I'm going to hand it over to the gentleman. Guys, what are we talking about?
Oh, what we're going to be talking about is the 6 things that should make you go, not necessarily the things that make you go, but the 6 things that will make you go, when it comes to building a portfolio or just investing or just retirement planning, just anything and everything out there. And again, you're listening to Sam and Ko's, and here we are back with some more knowledge bombs for you guys out there. And welcome to the most exciting podcast in radio or in podcast history.
Yeah, we're used to saying radio.
But, before that, Ko's, we actually got a message, and I wanted to share this message with you. And inside this message from Greg from Cathedral City. Sorry for butchering your name. It's really difficult to say. Greg from Cathedral City. Actually, I was reading this, Ko's, and there's quite a few things that we can actually talk about, even though I think there's just really one question behind it. So Greg says he's 62 years old and will be looking to leave his company in the next 6 months. He says, I've got 5 kids, 2 from a previous marriage, and they are all out of the house except for one who I am putting through school. She has 2 more years. I heard that you guys want to make sure that I have a financial plan in place, but what exactly does a financial plan include? Is it basically a budget? Thank you. Well, Greg, no, it's not necessarily just basically a budget, even though a budget can be part of a plan, an overall plan for you. But when it comes to an overall plan, when it comes to your retirement, there's really so many plans inside the plan. So it's a financial roadmap you want to try to get, and that we're advocates of, is just an entire financial roadmap. We liken it to if you were to go to a trip somewhere. If you were to go to Hawaii, so we know that there is a plan to go to Hawaii. So there's fundage. There is fundage meaning funds, money. We're trying to figure out how to get there, of course, what airline we're going to be utilizing to get there. And then once we get there, there's other plans. We just don't arrive at the airport. What are the other plans? Well, we got to get a car. And once we get the car, we got to get to our place. And once we get to our place, do we just hang out in the hotel all day long, or do we start sightseeing? And if we're sightseeing and we're in Hawaii, there's so many things to do with such limited time. So there are plans inside plans inside plans. And so when it comes to an entire financial roadmap, you're going to have all these mini plans inside that. And inside these mini plans, you have inside the financial roadmap, you have the mini plans such as retirement planning, income planning, estate planning, social security planning, elderly planning, which is long-term care, things of that nature. And so there's all these little plans that go into play. So when we do talk about a financial plan, which we consider a financial roadmap, it isn't just basically a budget. No, Greg, it's actually more involved in that. There's so many aspects, and not every single mini plan that I've just mentioned is incorporated inside that financial roadmap, because there's so many things that go on that to throw all this at you is like throwing a Donnelly directory at you. So much information can cause, what a lot of people say, paralysis by analysis, over analysis. So we take the most important things to you and we just build upon that and build upon that. And it can actually take about maybe an entire 3, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe 5 years to actually incorporate every single part of the financial roadmap and the mini plans that are inside that. I hope that answers your question, but in reading this, and I think I'm going to go ahead and send it on over to you after I mention this, Greg, you indicated that you've got 5 kids. You're looking to retire in about 6 months, you said. He's got about 5 kids, 2 from a previous marriage. Now, I know that this has come across
By the way,
a few times.
That made me go, That was a moment for me.
All right. Yeah.
You mentioned there's a marriage or previous marriage and kids from 2 different marriages. It was a moment for me.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you go off that moment, because I think you're feeding off exactly from what I read here. So go ahead and take it.
Yeah. So the moment, is triggered by, really, it's just our collective experience, Sam, working with so many different people. There's a fair share of the population that we've worked with that have come from a divorced situation. It seems to keep repeating, where we will meet a person who has been divorced for a period of time. Sometimes it's as long as 30 years. And they operate on a presumption that they are in complete and full understanding of what the agreement was from their previous marriage as the divorce. And they will continue to operate as a worker or as a business owner, thinking that they have a complete and clear understanding of how much of their retirement they get to keep and how much of it goes to an ex-spouse. And lo and behold, 30 years goes by, or however many years is applicable in that person's case. They have a very, very rude awakening. There's actually a stronger term I'd like to use to express that, but that would not be appropriate in a podcast or on the air or in a radio show, or for that matter, anywhere in public. But it's a very, very shocking moment of truth that becomes front and just completely in the face of the person who's falsely operated under an understanding for 20, 30 years, only to find out in a matter of 1 to 2 minutes that a significant portion of their retirement assets actually belongs to somebody else in a ratio and a proportion that was completely unexpected. So the lesson learned is, if you are in a divorce situation, in this case, it would be Greg, it would behoove Greg to experience the moment and respond to it by calling their retirement administrator and find out what the situation is, who has claims to his or her retirement assets. In this case, it's Greg, as I said. Greg, you need to go and make some phone calls and find out who's got claims. Does your ex have claims? If so, how much? What percentage? And there's a thing called a quadro. It's a QDRO. It's Qualified Domestic Relationship Order. It's a legal document. It's typically filed by the ex-spouse's attorney, and it goes to the retirement administrator, and they have to follow those directions. And unless you have an understanding of what that quadro says, you may be in for the shock of your life. So that's my takeaway on that, Sam.
Yeah, you may be in for the shock of your life, because it's happened many, many, many times. And you're right, Coz, because as soon as I read that part, he had one question basically for us in his message, but in there was that nugget in there. And I know that you've had some experience recently. As a matter of fact, I was right there when things were happening. And there's nothing worse than to be this close to retiring. He's 62 years old. And in this, Greg, you're 62. You got 6 months to go. And if you don't know, in fact, if you have no idea what is going on with regards to the money that you have and how long ago that divorce was. So for instance, let's just say, because he was only married for about 2 years. If he was only married for 2 years or 3 years, whatever it might be, and that was over 30 years ago, he could be in for a rude awakening. And it's one of those holy crap moments that not only do you have to face yourself, but you got to also face your current spouse and say, hey, honey, we have a little bit of a change of plan. We wanted to go ahead and stay here in California, but there's a chance that we may not be able to afford it anymore, because we may not have as much money as we thought we were going to have. So these are things that you definitely don't want to necessarily find out on your retirement day. You definitely want to go ahead and do that. So for all you listeners out there, if you've been part of a marriage and you have that marriage and it was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you don't have the paperwork of that marriage anymore, run on over to your local court and request a copy of your quadro, request a copy of the paperwork, the dissolution of marriage, everything, and try to figure it out yourself and see if there's anything in there that needs to be handled before something transpires with regards to your company and yourself, and you decide to go ahead and take off.
Right. I mean, we can extend this example, Sam, another an hour and a half, and we would not run out of things to talk about. But there was also, in Greg's situation, there's kids from a previous marriage. So beneficiaries are things that need to be looked at. There's just so many more things that we can talk about. But
that's what I'm saying. These are the things, Greg, I got to tell you, there's a lot of little nuggets here, a lot of little nuggets, but
it can be overwhelming. And that's okay. That's a natural human response, right? To feel overwhelmed, but it doesn't have to be that overwhelming. It's just breaking it down into all the little pieces and methodically going through and handling each of them. You've got plenty of time. You just have to get the process going. But to wait until the last minute, that is definitely a overwhelming situation. So start early, get the planning going down now.
Yep. So, hey, let's go back to the 6 things that should and will make you go, So, I like to go ahead and say, number one, this is actually pretty interesting. Plan on using 100 years when creating your financial plan. And what I mean by that is plan on using 100 years. When I first got in the industry years and years ago, back in 1993, we were utilizing retirement analyses. We had these really cool, tricky software programs inside those big old green screens of a monitor that weighed about 200 pounds. And it was revolutionary at the time. And you just plug in the name and all this information, and it spits out this 100-page document that shows what you should do. And the interesting part was that these analyses were all based off of individuals that are around 82, 83 years old as far as their life expectancy was. So people back then, close to 30 years ago, people were expected to live to 82 to 85. And then over the years, we had to adjust those numbers to about 90, 95, to the point where you want to start utilizing the number 100. There's more people turning 100. And I'm not just talking about 6 people to 12 people. I'm talking about thousands of people in the United States that are going from 99 to 100 years old because of the advancement in modern medicine, that you got to start planning for 100. I think a good rule of thumb is that, what we'd like to do is we'd like to ask a person how old their parents were. And so if someone said my parents were around, call it, 85 when they passed away, a good rule of thumb is to just add 10 more years. So you add 10 more years, so that's going to be you. So 95. Or if they were 90, add another 10, that's going to be 100. You have a parent that's 101, 102, add another 10 years of that, and you're looking at about 110 years old. And again, it's because of the advancement in modern medicine. So I'm starting to see people, they're still utilizing their mortality levels, the life expectancy rates in their financial plans at 85, 90. Why is this so important? This is so important because one of the biggest fears out there is running out of money while you're still alive. And you got to understand that your plan has to assume that you're going to be living past 100 or at least to 100 years old. So if you're 60 years old, that's another 40 years. You got to make sure that your money is going to last you for another 40 years at the very least. It's something which, again, a lot of poor planning is created because they just don't input the appropriate data.
There are so many stories I hear where an elder person has been living in like an assisted living home. And for decades, they had plenty of money to afford it. But then what happened was now they're in their mid to late 90s and they've outlived what their plan was. And now they're down to the last dollar. And so do you know, Sam, what these homes do? They will evict these people. They're out and they get forced out. Now, where do these people go? I don't know. I don't know where they go. They have to go somewhere. And you know what? You think that family members want to be taking on the responsibility of caring for them? I think there's a lot of good kids out there that will, but you know what? There's a lot of actually good kids that won't. So it's an epidemic. It's the great American retirement crisis.
It definitely is. Oh yeah. It's one of the great American retirement crises that we talk about, we discuss and are on our road tour. And unfortunately, it's just one of those scenarios. There's a solution. There's several solutions. However, a lot of times people just don't necessarily want to take a look at their own mortality. And as a result, that particular solution goes by the wayside up into the point where they need it. And when they need it, that's when the solution becomes unaffordable. Yeah, there's a solution to a lot of these things, folks. And it's just really understanding, in this case, number one, planning on using 100 years. So if you are putting together a financial roadmap, you want to put your life expectancy at 100. And I don't care if you say, you know what, I don't know, man, because my parents lived to 75, so I don't expect to live past 75 years old. My uncle, he passed at 72. My aunt passed at 79. Again, with the advancement in modern medicine, let's think about this. I'm here in California, and there's no smoking over here. So you got people that are eating healthier, people that understand, how to hydrate their bodies, not necessarily taking in the sugars. I mean, a lot of the information that we know today that wasn't necessarily applied before. There's people that are exercising on a more regular basis. There's companies that are embracing the exercising. They're embracing a better fit workforce. You're looking at a situation where this group, this number of people, I think they call them the centurions. kind of like that American Express Centurion card. The people that are turning 100, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And there's soon going to be about, I think, 10 to 15,000 Centurions every single day, because just again, like we discussed, things are just getting better for them. And the last thing you want to do is retire at 65 and run out of money at 85 or 90. That's no good. No good.
No bueno.
So, number two, when it comes to 6 things that should make you and will make you go, is should you keep your investment turnover to a minimum? Now, a lot of people say, should I care?
Right. Well, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
People think, what do you mean by that, Sam?
Well, okay. So here's something that's really interesting. So, let's just take, for example, cars or houses. If you like to keep buying and selling a house, and I'm going to go really extreme here. Let's say you buy and sell a house 20 times in 1 month. Well, that's 20 times in 1 month. You've exchanged hands on a piece of real estate, but understand something, that you've also paid commissions depending on what side you are on, the buyer or the seller side, but you paid commission 20 times. So that is called turnover. Okay. And when it comes to investing, there's what's called turnover as well. And turnover is when you have a portfolio of stocks. And let's just say you have $100,000 and you have 100 stocks. And the following year, those 100 stocks don't resemble the 100 stocks that you had a year ago. As a matter of fact, they're completely different. You just basically turned your entire portfolio over 100%. So the one thing that we see people do is there's a lot of turnover. You want to keep turnover to a minimum because of fees that can ultimately eat into your returns and be that roadblock that stops you from generating the return that you need in retirement to make sure that you have money left over or still available when you're 100 years old.
Right. And that turnover, the higher it is, probably, as we said in our last podcast, it may be a symptom of an investor experiencing excitement in trying to make money grow. And as we said then, that if growing money becomes an exciting experience, it may be problematic. It may be that you're doing something's wrong. So again, excitement is generally not a very good thing to be experiencing when you're trying to grow your money. And so we always like to say, hey, if you're growing money and it feels like you're watching paint come off a barn in Iowa, you may be doing something right. So
right.
Turnover, high turnover could be a bad sign.
It can be a bad sign because turnover has been shown to correlate with poor investment performance. So, that's unless you are an expert in this field, unless you actually trade for a living and you're a portfolio manager and you love doing that, then turnover is going to be part of your repertoire. But if you're like most individuals that are looking to just live a low key life and enjoy life, then you're definitely not necessarily going to want to have a tremendous amount of turnover. Like I said, turnover, if you had in 1 month, if you turned over 20 pieces of real estate, imagine the hectic, the life that you would live, the drama filled. It would be a nightmare. So basically almost the same thing. So the other thing when it comes to the 6 things that should make you and will make you go, should I keep my costs low? I don't know, Coach. Should you pay more?
I don't think that would be a good idea. But you know what? A lot of people seem to think it is.
But here's the thing. I think here, should you keep your costs low? I think that's pretty much a loaded question because the answer is always going to be absolutely. But how many vehicles that are out there have hidden fees that prevent you, that they masquerade around low fees, but they prevent you in the form of hidden fees from keeping the cost low? There's a lot. Oh, yeah, and we're not advocates of variable annuities. Where we definitely like the other type of annuity, but it does have its caveats as well as far as growth is concerned. We're talking about fixed indexed annuities. But when it comes to variable annuities, not only do they have high fees, but you can also lose your money there too. So it's a no bueno type situation. So variable annuities, we definitely don't necessarily like to entertain those.
Right, and there's many other types of products out there that have fees, and we're not going to dissect that here. But you're probably living in a bunch of them.
Oh, you mean 401ks?
Yeah, if you're working for a company, believe me. There's
No, hey man, you know what? I get it. That's going to be another show, but there's no reason why we shouldn't talk a little bit about those, because there's a lot of fees, and I guess we can talk about a few things, because most mutual funds or most 401ks have mutual funds inside it, and inside the mutual funds there's what's called expense ratios, and these expense ratios are the fees that typically these money managers get. But what's not necessarily disclosed is that these money managers, they do a lot of turnover. As a matter of fact, what they do in a mutual fund is you buy a mutual fund because it's actively monitored. It's active. It's an active form of investing, and that there is a money manager. There's a dude at the helm, and this dude is supposed to make good decisions, and he's supposed to be a very good stock picker, a very good stock trader, and he's supposed to know better than each and every single one of us and what we should do with regards to choosing what kind of company we should own in that portfolio. As a result, he does a lot of buying and selling. And when it comes to a lot of this buying and selling, we do what's called turnover. So they do turnover. They turn that portfolio over. And guess what, Coz? So many times we've seen turnover ratios of about 150, 200, 300%. We see, and here's the thing, it's okay if it's $100,000 and they turned it over twice, okay. But if you've got a $15 billion mutual fund, that thing's got turned over. They just basically flipped that thing 3 times. So you got a $15 billion mutual fund and they flipped it $45 billion to the tune of $45 billion $45 billion
in transactions.
Worth. Yeah. Exactly.
In transactions. Serious fees being generated. And who do those fees go to? They don't go to the money manager. They don't go to you.
No, so, Mr. Money Manager, he goes, it's kind of like a law firm, guys. So for anyone listening, it's kind of like a law firm.
All right. And let's not pick a fight with an attorney now.
No, but it's pretty standard. It's pretty standard if you put a retainer down and that retainer is for that attorney's service, because if they fax something for you, if they email something for you, if they request something from the courts for you, then that's going to be part that eats into your retainer. So what ends up happening is that, all these little ancillary things start adding up. And then before you know it, you're not only paying for your attorneys monthly, but you're also paying for every nook and cranny, that stamp that cost you X amount of money to go ahead and mail out a manila package. That's going to cost you. So when it comes to managing money, these money managers, they don't assume the fees when it comes to the buying and selling. They make the choices to buy and sell, but they don't necessarily assume those fees. Those fees are assumed by the shareholder. So that's just one of the fees, but also
right. And there are alternatives to that, right? So if you want to go low cost, there are some solutions, and so
there's a solution to everything. But the thing is that there's also other fees. There's administrative fees. And depending on what kind of 401k you have, if you have a variable annuity or you've got some type of insurance product inside the portfolio, there could be mortality fees. So there's a lot of types of fees, and you could be feed to death and you are under the impression that there are no fees, or if there's a fee, it's only 1%. But then you find out, and we've experienced this, you find out that you could be paying anywhere between 6, 7, 8, 9%. So keep your costs low. 6 things that should and will make you go, Keep your costs low.
Right.
So, number 4. Here's something really, really cool I like to talk about. Never overpay for an asset. All right.
That's common sense. Don't overpay for a car or a refrigerator.
Yeah, but why is this in there? Because, I'll be,
because
why is it in there? These guys are putting it in for a reason.
Yeah, because it happens.
There's no way around it. I mean, price is going to be paramount to the returns that you ultimately earn, right? Like in real estate, it's all a function of location. You make your money on real estate when you buy it. So if you bought a piece of real estate many, many, many years ago, that's when you made your money. And so we see constantly, people that are working for particular companies, and they have company stock, and their company stock has gone through the roof, and potentially, by the way, it could continue to keep going through the roof. But for the most part, are they actually overpaying for that particular asset? Because we've seen nightmares in the past where they have indeed paid and overpaid for those particular assets, and when those asset classes or those assets actually kind of correct and come back to equilibrium, you got a lot of people that aren't very happy. So there's a lot of real world examples of making sure that you don't necessarily overpay for an asset, but I think that's pretty common sense. But again, we see it often.
Right. And so there's the opposite example where I think you might remember the gentleman that we had spoken to, Sam, but he works for a company. He's in aerospace, and he participates in the company employee stock option program. And they have a program where, as an employee, he can purchase company stock, and it's always bought at, I think it was a 15% discount. So whatever the market was, I think that because they work there, they're able to purchase the same shares the public buys, but he gets it at a 15% discount. And I think the program allowed him that after a certain number of days that he could go ahead and sell it. And that's what he was doing, basically buying at a discount and as quickly as he could selling it. And in general, he was yielding a pretty darn good return on a consistent basis. And that's a perfect example of what he did opposite to what we say is a hum moment. And that's, the hum moment is when you buy something that's overpriced. He was buying something that was underpriced.
Right.
Pretty wise move on his part, I would say.
Well, and that's what creates the overpriced situation is that, you have a bunch of employees buying stock at a lower price, and it fuels because there's a lot more selling. There's a lot more buying than there is selling, and that drives the price up. And what ends up happening is that it continues to keep fueling it, and the demand for shareholder value keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher because you have all these employees that own a stock at a 15% discount. So they're expecting this thing to go higher, and it does go higher. And before you know it, it creates an overvalued situation. So even though you're buying a stock that's 15%, that's at a 15% discount to current market values, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're buying a asset class that is of value. You could very well be buying into a overpriced asset, even at a slight discount to today's prices. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like if you bought a Mercedes-Benz for $300,000, yeah, you got a 15% discount on it. But let's face it, it's still expensive, man.
Yeah, it's still expensive. That's a very good point, Sam.
I mean, that's one thing. You don't want to necessarily pay for an asset.
Yeah, you just got to know what you're doing. Sometimes it's
right.
not that easy to do, and sometimes it is.
Yeah. It happens all the time. So, moving along, when it comes to the 6 things that should make you and will make you go, and we talked about a little bit, is you definitely don't want to always rely on a single investment, just a stock. And, back in the day, and it still is apparent today, you have people that just own company stock. And, we know a lot of people that owned one particular company stock last year. And the market was down, about 7% last year. And this company stock was down over 22%.
I thought they were down even more than that, but we won't mention the name of the company. But
yeah, we're talking about a different one.
There's one we can mention from many years ago, and that was Enron. Remember?
Yeah.
These people that worked for Enron, they had all of the retirement assets in that company.
Yeah.
And they were completely, they had relied on that company for 100% of their future retirement, and they got wiped out. Right.
I mean, they were buying into a bubble, and that bubble was continuing to go higher, and it was fun, and a lot of people were making money, and a lot of people cashed out, or not cashed out, but they borrowed against their 401k plan so that they could go, travel and buy that his and her BMW and do all these things and fix up their home and do all these great things. And unfortunately, what happened was that that one thing, that one investment, that single holding really hurt them when things went haywire. So yeah, relying on a single investment, we see it more often than not because a lot of people are just tied into the company that they work at. They have so much pride in where they're working, and I get it. Love your wife, love your kids, love your dog, but don't love your company, don't love your stock. Those are the things that we want to tell you.
It's interesting that so there's a lot of people that remember what happened with Enron, and there were other companies that went through the same thing. Like I think it was WorldCom, there's Tyco. And people got hurt by it, but these same generation of people sadly haven't learned their lesson because they're still doing the same thing again. And Sam, you and I, we've met many of people who have all of their retirement assets tied up with the company that they work for, and it's just you can bring that that wisdom to them, but sometimes they're just not ready to accept it. But that's just part of the human nature side.
Yeah, and sometimes if you're like me and you had that one big massive gain in one particular stock when you're much younger, you were allowed to make that mistake because you were younger. And I'm happy I made that mistake when I was younger because I just put all my money on one horse. And yeah, it was painful. It was painful, but it was fun on the way up.
It's always fun on the way up.
It's always fun on the way up.
Always
man.
fun on the way up.
So, the other part too is in 6 things that should make you and will make you go, is you want to make sure that you structure your portfolio, your investments in a tax efficient manner. I think, we've done several podcasts on this, but more and more it's interesting. It's just not catching wind. It's just, it's lying dead, and that people just don't understand, tax efficiency and the value in making sure you utilize one particular vehicle for your money versus another vehicle. And unfortunately, I think we just got to continue to keep saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it and repeating it so that it starts ingraining into people's minds. But, being tax efficient in your retirement years is going to be very important, because we've run into so many people that are paying more in taxes in their retirement years than they did when they were working. And that's the one thing you don't want to do. You want to get that dude that's wearing that red, white, and blue clown outfit away from you as much as possible. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that you're tax efficient now and you're in the vehicles that can help you today that will help you later on down the road. And the vehicle that we're talking about, Coase, is
Roth.
Roth.
R-O-T-H.
Did you say Roth like a dog? Roth.
Roth. If you don't have a Roth vehicle, it might be a Ruh-roh moment for you. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, the thing is, a lot of people don't know, what we mean by having a tax efficient strategy. And there's many a strategy out there that is tax efficient. So there isn't just one that we promote, but there's one in particular that does apply to a lot of people that are working out there. If you're working for an employee, it behooves you to check with your retirement plan administrator to see if your 401k plan or your 403b, whatever it is, may have a Roth provision, a Roth option in there. And I don't know if we're trying to get into the dissecting of a Roth efficient strategy, but basically the Roth gives you a different option. Most people will take an option where they'll amass a large retirement account, only to find that when they turn 70 and a half, or when they start taking at a younger age, that not only will they owe taxes, but at some point they get old enough to where they're going to be required to take a certain amount of income out to pay taxes because Uncle Sam wants his share. And so if you don't want to live under that kind of pressure as an old person, I certainly don't, then there's a thing called a Roth, and it could be an IRA or it could be in a Roth. Inside of a 401k. And there's other tax efficient strategies besides Roth as well. But bottom line is this: if you have a strategy where you build your retirement so that when you take the income from it as a retiree, and you don't have to pay taxes on that, basically you own all that money to yourself, then you don't have to report that as well. You don't have to report that as income on your tax return. And guess what? It keeps your taxable income either very, very low or non-existent, and it helps you keep your Social Security tax-free as well. So anyway, I don't know if we need to dive more into that, Sam, or not. We've got limited time here, but the Roth strategy is something to be looking at.
Absolutely. You want to definitely have your portfolio be tax efficient as you possibly can. And, I tell you, Coase, is that, a lot of times what happens is, I get it. A lot of people, they go through life and, looking, 10, 15, 20 years down the road is really hard to fathom and visualize in some people's minds. And as a result, they don't necessarily have that plan. So when they look, they understand, they get it. You talk to anybody about the Roth and they'll say, absolutely, makes total sense. It's the smartest thing on the face of the planet. It's the best thing since sliced bread. But they don't necessarily execute upon it because there's no need, there's no demand, there's no sense of urgency at this particular time. And so a lot of people are just clued into, what the television's saying and things of that nature as the economy. And in many cases, they're not even tuned into that. They're just tuned into everyday life, just going into work, coming back home, hanging out with their family, going to a baseball game with their kid, and watching their, coaching their kids' soccer game or whatever it might be. That when it comes to tax efficiency and planning, it typically happens, right when they're about to leave, and that's why you get a lot of people that contact, financial experts out there, typically, a month to 2 weeks to 1 week to sometimes one day right before they're about to retire, because that sense of urgency kicks in, So yeah, it's the 6 things that could make you and will make you go, I'm sure we can add 4 more to it. But for the most part, those are the 6 that we want to talk about that we have time for today.
Fantastic, guys. As usual, I like them. If you had one thing that you wanted to tell the audience before we cut out for today, what would that be?
Well, I mean, we said it before, you can do all these things, but one of the things that will destroy pretty much everything that we talk about, and that you can do all the right things and build up a retirement portfolio, but if you have debt, you're just basically sabotaging everything that you work hard for. So if you have debt, get out of it and figure out a way to stay out of it. And the other one is, most listeners, the average population does not save enough money. So there's a few that do save a ton, and it's a mindset. I try to teach, children that the norm is to save. I kind of brainwash people. I say, look, the norm is to save 50% of your income. Now, as adults, we know that that's very hard to do. But if you can't do 50%, then, it should be realistic to be able to do 25 to 30% of your income should be saved for retirement. And you will, again, it's just a mindset. If you just figure out how to get that done between you and your spouse, you subscribe to that thinking and you stay out of debt, you will succeed in having a very secure retirement.
And I like to leave people with, I know that, as of May 1st today, that we're recording this, I'd like to go ahead and let people know that, because I've had conversations with individuals currently right now, they're sitting on a bunch of cash because they're thinking that the economy is not very good. But just being a student of the economy, the student of the markets, we may get a slight correction of 5-7%. It's nothing that we can trade. But for the most part, what's going to end up happening is the Federal Reserve has done something very, very important. They did a complete about face to what their plan was over the past 1.5 to 2 years. Over the past 1.5 to 2 years, the Federal Reserve, Powell, and his group of merry men have made it a point to raise interest rates to try to slow down the economy. They gave every reason why they should do it, and all of a sudden they did complete about face. And I think a lot of it had to do with December. But the fact is that now I'm starting to see PR campaigns. I'm starting to see a Federal Reserve PR campaign out there that is ultimately trying to invade our minds and to create this element inside us that there is no inflation in the economy. And because there's no inflation in the economy, what ends up happening is that they're going to be put in a position where they can keep rates where they are, if not reduce interest rates. And by keeping rates where they are or reducing interest rates, that should fuel the market. But the issue that I have personally, is that unless you haven't been driving around and unless you haven't been eating, it's hard to understand. There is inflation in the economy. Just look at gas prices, look at food. Coase has said it many times. I've said it a few times, is that you go through a drive-through, the combo number one, wherever you go, is going to be anywhere between $9, $10, $11, which was only about $5, $6 just a couple of years ago. So we're starting to see some inflation. We're starting to see a lot of inflation. The Fed's going to participate, and they're going to marry that inflation. They're going to support that inflation. And with inflation is a strong economy. And with a strong economy, people sitting on cash, you might miss another window of opportunity. And like I said, it's oftentimes a mantra just to go and stay away from trouble. But for the most part, you want to definitely be in a position where you are taking advantage and have a good diversification in your portfolio. So that's the one thing I wanted to go ahead and leave with.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for your time again today. And thank you all for listening to the Financial Liberty Project podcast with Sam Legaspi and Koz Tsukamoto. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Sam and Koz come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Thanks again for listening today. For everyone at the Financial Liberty Project, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
It's that time again where the call of the open road makes its way. We hope good fortune finds you on your own personal road. And until next time, we thank you for listening to the Financial Liberty Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.